Hey everyone, Mitch coming up with the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, well, I'm going to teach you how to lose your friends for $34. Now, why exactly would you want to do that? Well, I don't know. You keep, wanting more of these episodes for some reason. I don't know why you keep needing advice on how to lose your friends and by doing so through magic, but hey, that's your thing, okay? Not mine, all right? I'm just here to help out. So on this episode, well, I've got a very crazy and absolutely terrifying deck for your friends that will drive them away in absolutely no time. Well, speaking of time, that's what this deck is all about. So let's jump into it. Our commander for this deck is Arkham Dagson, a very weird old commander that is pretty fantastic. And I wouldn't say that this is the commander isn't the reason why your friends will run away in terror. It is because of the card that this commander can help you go get. Now, I will mention that if you already have Arkham Dagson, well, you're going to be saving yourself like $13. It's a decently expensive card. The rest of the cards in this deck are budget-friendly, except for one card that we'll get to here in a little bit. But yeah, let's go through the commander. A 2/2 Human Artificer for 3 and a blue. Tap target artifact creature's controller sacrifices it. That player may search their library for a non-creature artifact card, put on the battlefield, then shuffle their library. So this is very specific and worded in a very interesting way. Luckily, this does not say non-token. I feel like if this card was made these days, it'd be like, non-token creature, artifact creatures, controller sacrifices it. We can sacrifice a variety of artifact creatures. I mean, they can be, well, just, tokens, like I just kind of mentioned. They can be actual ones, which we can utilize, and get out early. So this can be sacrificed to go get our game plan going, or they can be actually kind of sneaky ones, like some lands maybe that we'll talk about here in a little bit that can help us out as well. The key to this commander, though, is that once we are set up, we can go get, well, a specific card that can make our opponent's lives absolutely miserable. And in fact, they might just be sitting there and twiddling their thumbs for the rest of the game while we do everything. Yeah, that's right. We are getting every single one of the turns. And at a certain point, there's probably not going to be anything our opponents can do about it. Yeah, you'll lose your friends pretty easily for $34 with this deck. So, like I mentioned, every single card in this deck outside of the commander and outside of one other card is less than $1. So again, it's still pretty budget friendly, even for the commander being $13. I mean, if you already have the commander, that's like, what, a $21 way to lose your friends? So there you go. Keep in mind that cost does not include basic lands, which you might be able to get from your friends, might be able to get from your OGS. I mean, it'd be kind of ironic, actually, if you got the basic lands from your friends for this deck. You're like, hey, can I, use, 32 islands or whatever it is? And your friend's like, yeah, sure. You're a good friend. You're like, thanks. And then 5 minutes later, you're upsetting them with this deck. So there you go. But, yeah, also it does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And of course, you might be able to save even more than that. You might be able to just lose your friends for even less than $34. If you buy this deck on TCG Player and utilize heavy plate and damage cards, you might be able to save even more. So make sure you optimize correctly. Now, with all that said, let's jump into the tactics. And the first one that I want to go after is, well, I'm sorry, Wayfarer's Bauble, because you are not in the first tactic because we've got the Golden Pig up first. I got to explain how this deck works first. I'm so sorry, Wayfarer's Bauble. Please forgive me. Because the Golden Pig of this deck is an unforgivable card, it is Timesifter. Yeah, this is a weird card. It does not see a lot of play at all because it's quite strange. It is a $2 card, so yeah, that's slightly outside of my budget constraints. But again, for this deck, for losing your friends for $33.99 is what I have on my screen right now for Moxfield. Yeah, it is well worth that. An artifact for 5 that says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, each player removes the top card of their deck from the game. It should say exile, it's an old card. Anyways, the player who moved the card the highest mana cost takes next turn for this one. If 2 or more players' cards are tied for the highest cost, the tied players repeat this process until the tie is broken. Basically, hey, everyone, what's the biggest thing on top? Is it mine? Oh, it is mine. Okay, well, I get to go again. Oh, and then again. Oh, and then again. Because we've got ways to pretty much ensure that's going to be happening. We've got ways to manipulate the top of libraries. We've got ways to look at the top of libraries. We've got ways to know if we are going to be getting the extra turn. And if we're not going to be getting the extra turn, we've got ways to change that fact. To be like, nope, we've got an absurd amount of high mana value cards in this deck, and we're going to be hitting that again and again and again. And at a certain point, there's really nothing your opponents can do to stop it. So you basically just take all the extra turns you want, and your opponents are just going to be sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Yes, pure evil. Yes, losing friends. What's not to love about that? Well, except for, if you want to keep your friends, then don't play this deck. But yeah, if you do want to play it, I should have said earlier, there's a link to it in the description below. So there you go. But now let's move on to the next tactic. And again, I'm so sorry. Here we go. We got started up. I'm so sorry, Wayfarer's Bauble. Here we go. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble in this tactic. Pay 2, tap, sacrifice, go get a base land, into play, tapped. Go get that island. Then we've got Everflowing Chalice, an incredibly flexible and fantastic mana rock. Pay 2, taps for 1. Pay 4, taps for 2. Basically, you get half the amount of mana back that you put into it. Very flexible, very fantastic. And yeah, it's not going to win you any of those mana cost competitions on the top of your library, but yeah, it can definitely get you there when you are working to make your plan work. Moving on, Ethereum Sculptor. This is not technically ramp. I almost slipped my words there. I almost said reduction. This is not technically ramp. It is reduction. There we go. Artifact spells you cast cost once to cast. We've got an absurd amount of artifacts in this stack. This can save us a ton of mana throughout the game. Then we've got Liquid Metal Torque. This one's very interesting. Tap, add a colorless, tap, target non-land permanent comes in artifacted to other types until end of turn. Basically, hey, there are certain creatures in this stack that are not artifacts, but we may end up using them with our commander in combination with something like this. So again, we turn our, non-artifact creature into an artifact, then we can sacrifice it with our commander to go tutor for, well, Timesifter or what other card we need. Then we've got Milliken. Milliken is a great card for this deck. A 0/1 for 2 mana. It's a mana dork. Tap Milliken card, add a colorless. So again, unlike other mana dorks, many other mana dorks, this one mills us, which is great because, hey, you know what's really important? Being able to control the top of your library. And when we know what the top of our library is, we can say, oh no, that's like a land on top. That has no mana cost. And Timesifter's in play. We need to ensure that we hit something big. So tap for a mana, mill something, get something potentially bigger on top so we can ensure that we keep taking the extra turns. Next up, there's Mind Stone. Tap for a colorless or pay 1, tap, sacrifice, draw a card. Again, not milling, but a way to get a card off the top of our library and into our hand. Then we've got Ornithopter Paradise, yet another artifact creature. Again, our commander loves artifact creatures because we can sacrifice them for our tutoring. So we're also going to be running Silver Mirror. A great mana dork as well. Taps for a blue. Yeah, what else to say? Then we've got Foundry Inspector. Again, like Ethereum Sculptor, very effective, very efficient, reduces the cost of artifacts by 1. That can be a ton. Again, with both of them in play, we can be casting a lot of things for free. And then we've got Midnight Clock. Not very efficient for a mana rock, just helps for a single blue mana. That being said, once this gets 12-hour counters on it, we basically Time Twister. We shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library and draw 7 cards. And that can be a great way to replace our hand and a great way not to mill ourselves out and lose the game, potentially. And also, we can pay to put our hour counters on this, too. And then finally, there's Palladium Mirror. A very effective, very efficient mana dork. Taps for 2 mana. Basically, Worn Power Stone on a creature. And again, another piece of creature fodder for our commander. Now, let's get into the real heart of this deck, though, in tactic number 3, and talk about no secrets. Because, well, Timesifter's got some buddies in this deck, and one of its best buddies is Lantern of Insight. This card is incredible. Artifact for a single mana. Each player plays the top card of the library revealed. So, there are no secrets. Everyone has to reveal the top card of the library, including ourselves. And because that is now what's going to be happening, hey, Timesifter is going to work perfectly with this deck. Because what we're going to be doing is saying, okay, hey, before our turn happens, yeah, do we have the highest CMC? If we do, cool, we don't have to do anything. We have to do absolutely nothing. We just sit there, we wait for our, the upkeep and essentially, or the end step, and then we essentially say, you know what, cool, we get an extra turn. Awesome, that's what's gonna happen. And again, if it's not that way, we've got ways to manipulate libraries. Again, we've got ways to, shuffle our own. We've got ways to mill our own. We've got ways to mill others. We got ways to draw cards. We've got ways to ensure that we're gonna get the high CMC on top. So again, if Timesifter is the Golden Pig, this is probably the Golden Piglet. This is number 2 in the deck. Moving on, Lens of Clarity. Slightly worse, but still having good information is a good thing. You may look at the top card of your library, and apparently face down creatures you don't control. So if we're playing against the Morph deck, nice. We can utilize the information. The important part, though, is we get to know what's on top of our own library. And again, even if we don't know our opponent's top, that is fine in some circumstances. We can chance and say, we've got a 7 cost thing on top of our library, and we've got a ton of those. So chances are pretty likely we'll get that extra turn. So that is a nice, interesting way to go about it as well. That being said, got a non-artifact that can help us out too, Wise and Snitches. A 1/3 flyer. It says players play the top card of the library revealed. So essentially, again, just like, you know, the lantern, it's a great way to say, I've got all the information I need. That being said, obviously, the lantern is something that we can actually tutor for with our commander, which again can be huge. And again, in some circumstances, you might want to tutor for that one first. So you set yourself up to actually be able to do what you need to do. And speaking of that, though, let's move on to tech number 4, which I'm calling Sift Through. Because again, like I mentioned, top of library control is huge for this kind of a deck. So first up, we've got Codex Shredder, a great card in this deck. Tap target player mills a card. So again, if anyone has a card on top of their library that's higher CMC than ours, and we're like, oh, we've got a 7, but they've got a 9, chances are pretty unlikely that they've got something that is just, you know, that big or, you know, slightly smaller underneath it. So let's mill that away. Maybe there's a land underneath that, and then all of a sudden, yeah, we're back on top. Also, we can pay 5 tap, sacrifice this, return to our card from your grave to your hand. A great way to recur something. Again, something huge like, you know, a Lantern of Insight, something like, you know, Timesifter, something that we really need to get back. Next up, though, we've got Ghoul Caller's Bell. This one's an interesting one. Tap, each player puts the top card of the library in their graveyard. This one can work very well if, say, we have a land on top of our library and other players maybe have something much bigger. Then we're like, okay, let's tap and then just spin the wheel, essentially, and we'll see if we end up with something bigger than our opponents. If we do, great. That's a fantastic way to do it to everyone. Next up, in a very similar way, Pyxis of Pandemonium. Tap, each player exiles the top card of the library face down. We can also pay 7 and tap and sacrifice this and play things or whatnot. That's not the point of this card. Basically, this is just another Ghoul Caller's Bell. Yeah, it's not milling it, it's getting rid of the card permanently. But still, it is a way to say, I don't like what's on top currently. Let's get rid of all that and then hope that we actually hit it again so that we end up getting the highest card on top so we can actually get an extra turn. Then we've got Wand of Vertebrae. This one just mills us, which is fine. We can also pay 2 tap and exile to shuffle the 5 target cards from a graveyard into our library. Again, if we don't like what's on top, we need a panic button with this. Well, we can actually say, oh, we need to get those cards back out of our graveyard, get them back in. You know, again, if Timesifter gets dealt with, this can be a way to get it actually back into our library so we can actually, you know, tutor for it again, get it back out into play. So this can be fantastic. Next up, there's Grind Clock. This one we can tap to play a charge counter on it, then tap and target player puts the top X cards of the library in their graveyard, X number of charge counters on it. If we are in that winning position where we're like, okay, yeah, we've got ourselves set up, we've got all these different ways to move to the top of our library, we've got Timesifter in play, we've got Lantern in play, our opponents haven't taken a turn in like 10 turns, yeah, we can just put more and more charge counters on this to put our opponents out of their misery to be like, okay, you mill 10, you mill 10, you mill 10, take players out quicker. We can also just mill ourselves even more though with Perpetual Timepiece. Tap, mill 2, or pay 2, exile it, shuffle any avatar cards in your graveyard in your library. Again, we've got a lot of ways to recur key pieces like Timesifter. This is yet another great one. And again, another way to manipulate the top of our own library. Then we've got Vantress Gargoyle. It's a 5/4 flyer for just 2 mana. We don't really care about that though. Can't attack unless defending player has 7 or more cards in their graveyard. I mean, they're going to. We've got plenty of ways to mill. So sure, I guess we can start attacking with this later if we want to actually win in that way. Can't block unless you've got 4 more cards in your hand. Don't really care about that. Tap, each player puts the top card of the library in their graveyard. Tap, each player mills 1 basically. Yeah, that can be a great way to, again, be a piece of creature fodder if we need to utilize this, sacrifice it to go get Timesifter or Lantern Insight or whatever. Other than that, though, it's just like another Ghoul Caller's Bell, which can be fantastic. And then finally, we've got Whetstone. This one does cost some mana to utilize, but again, in desperate times, that calls for desperate measures. Pay 3, each player mills 2. So again, hey, if we're about to go to that position, we're like, oh no, cards are going to get revealed. We don't have the biggest one. Just pay 3, mill it, and then you know what? Maybe we do hit something better. And if that doesn't happen again, you got more mana, do it again. Next up, though, let's talk about ways to really manipulate things with tech number 5, Perfect Placement. And we're going to start things off with a great card with Brainstone. And you probably know what the next card up is going to be. An artifact for 1, pay 2, tap, sacrifice, draw 3, put 2 from your hand on top of your library in any order. Basically, this can be a great way to set yourself up to be like, yeah, I'm going to be taking the extra turn because there's a giant card in my hand. Let's get on top of my library, and then I will be revealing that with Timesifter to ensure that I get that extra turn. We also have Brainstorm, the card that inspired Brainstone. Draw 3, put 2 from your hand on top of your library. Instant speed, fantastic for just 1 mana, especially in a deck like this. Then there's Expel from Vraska. This one's a very interesting one. It's got Ascend, so if we got 10 permanent City's Blessing, yeah, we're in Commander, we're gonna get to 10. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you have the City's Blessing, you may put that permanent on top of its owner's library instead. So if we've got something massive in play, we can put it on top of our library and ensure that that is the card that we reveal with Timesifter. Or, conversely, if an opponent maybe has something big on top of their library and they've got something pesky in play, and it's got a smaller CMC than the top of our library, we can say, let's get rid of that permanent, put it on top. It's going to get exiled with Timesifter, and goodbye permanently, and we get that extra turn. Then we've got Crystal Ball, a great repeatable effect. Pay 1, tap, scry 2. So again, really set yourself up for success with this. Speaking of scrying, then we've also got Eyes Everywhere. This one's a free effect. Beam upkeep, scry 1, pay 5, and a blue, exchange control event, target an online permanent, activate only anytime you cast a sorcery. Nice, steal something. Mystic Redaction, this one's quite interesting as well. Beginning upkeep, scry 1, whenever you discard a card, each opponent mills 2 cards. So this one, again, can work with ways that we can discard 2, assuming that, you know, we've got ways to discard, which of course we do, which we'll talk about later. So again, we can say, our opponents have a bigger card on top of the library than we do. Let's get them to mill. Let's make sure that we can actually have the highest on top. Then we've got Netherese Puzzle Ward. This one lets us scry 4 if we roll a 4, I guess I should say. If we upkeep, roll a d4, scry extracts the result. So there you go. We can scry more than one. We can really set ourselves up for success. Whenever you roll a card or roll a die's highest natural result, draw a card. So we can also get some card advantage out of this as well. And then finally, there's the Temporal Anchor. This one actually is an artifact, so we can tutor for it with our commander. Beginning of upkeep, scry 2, a really good way to set ourselves up. Whenever you choose to put one of our cards at the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards to the bottom of your library. Can be a good way to say, oh, I get some extra value out of actually scrying, because during your turn you may play cards, exile the Temporal Anchor. Basically, those scryed cards are an extra kind of extension of your hand, which can be fantastic. Now, let's take a step back really quick with tactic number 6, which I'm calling Fodder Fun, because yeah, I've talked about a couple of artifact creatures, but we need some other ways to ensure that we get, you know, some artifact creatures in play for our commander to sacrifice. So yeah, Fishing Construction's a great one in this deck. Enchantment for 3 and a blue. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get a 1/1 colorless Thopter. So basically, hey, you're going to be playing a lot of artifacts. Make sure that you can make more artifact creatures for some artifact fodder for your commander. Moving on, we've got Thopter Spy Network. This one says, beginning your upkeep, you control an artifact, create a 1/1 Thopter. We're going to have artifacts. We're going to be making a Thopter on every single one of our upkeeps. Whenever one or more artifact creature control deal combination to a player, draw a card. Again, with these Thopters especially, they are evasive, so hey, we can utilize that to kind of manipulate the top of our deck as well. Again, if a card on top is not what we want it to be, if it's, you know, like land, something that's got a small CMC, hit another player with one of your Thopters, draw a card. Maybe it's gonna be something bigger on top. Next up, we've got Dollhouse of Horrors. Pay 1, tap, exile a card from your graveyard, creature card from your graveyard, create a token's copy of the exile card, except a 0/0 card, a construct artifact, just other types. This creature gets +1 for each construct you control. It has haste until end of turn, activate as a sorcery. This is a very, very good card because, again, this essentially says, hey, you know what? We're going to get creatures out of our graveyard. There are certain creatures that can go directly from our hand to our graveyard. We'll talk about those here in a little bit. Creatures are going to die. We can ensure that we actually make a token copy of them, essentially, that is an artifact. So, again, our commander can utilize them as creature fodder. And when it comes to fodder, I mean, no one knows that like Mirror Battlesphere, ETBs make for 1/1 mirror. Yeah, basically 5 pieces of creature fodder for the price of 1. And then we've also got, speaking of which, Pentavus, a 0/0 construct, enters with 5 counters on it, pay 1, remove a counter from it, and make a Pentavite. That is an artifact that we can also sacrifice too, so there you go. And if you want to sacrifice those Pentavites, you can also put counters on this. Yeah, either way, I mean, what you're going to do is, again, make creature fodder for your commander with these. Moving on, though, let's talk about some high CMC cards. I mean, these that we just talked about are high CMC too, but in tag number 7, less is more. So first up, we've got Spire Golem. Very simple, very effective for this kind of a deck. 6 mana, a 2/4 flyer. Doesn't really matter what it does. It has affinity for islands, though. So we're basically going to pay nothing for this. Again, we want to ensure that we have a good amount of high CMC cards in this deck, and we really do. We've got quite a bit. I mean, like over like a third of the deck is high CMC cards. The reason this deck works is because, hey, we can still utilize these cards because, well, they've got some tricks up their sleeve, like this kind of cost reduction. So we can still utilize them, and again, this can be a great way to say, hey, I've got cheap creature fodder for my commander to utilize, and again, if it's on the top of my library, that's also great as well. Moving on, Assert Authority. Affinity for artifacts, so this can cost us just 2 mana, an instant, counter target spell, and if it's countered this way, we exile it. Which basically is just a better version of counterspell in most aspects for this deck because, yeah, we're going to have 5 artifacts in play. We're going to be able to cast this for just 2, so there you go. Then we've got another 7 mana spell, Barricade Breaker, 7/5 Juggernaut with Improvise, so our artifacts can help cast this spell. Any of our artifacts, not just our mana rocks, any of them. And attacks each combat fabled, sure, doesn't really matter all that much. If we need to utilize it for fodder, we can do so right away. Then we've got Mirror Forcer, again, another 7 mana artifact creature that we can cast for basically nothing. Affinity for artifacts, so if we've got 7 artifacts in play, we're paying 0 for this. Next up, there's Reality Heist. Again, instant for basically blue for us because we're going to reduce that cost for 5 essentially because it's going to have 1 less, for each artifact we control. Basically Affinity. I don't know why they didn't put Affinity. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 artifact cards from on them, put in your hand. The rest of the bottom related random order. Again, this is basically a great way to get more artifacts off the top of our library. Or again, if this is on the top of our library, great. That's great for Timesifter. Then Sojourner's Companion, Affinity for artifacts again, cast it for 0 essentially, or we can artifact land cycle if we need to. And yes, we do have an artifact land. Then we've got Dig Through Time. This one's an 8 mana card. Delve Away, though that costs. Just pay 2 mana for this. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. 2 of them go in your hand. The rest go in the bottom of your library in any order. So again, we're going to be milling a lot. We're going to have a lot of cards in our graveyard. This, again, is easily going to cost us just 2 mana most of the time. Moving on, Spotterthopter. This one utilizes the prototype mechanic in a fantastic way. So we can cast this for 8, and it's a 4/5. It's a flyer, enters the battlefield. We scry, expresses its power. Again, scrying is great in this deck. That being said, we don't have to pay 8 for this. We can just pay 4 mana in total. Then it's just a 2/3 instead. So still scry 2, which is great. And again, a way to say, yeah, I've got cheap creature fodder when I need it. Moving on, Treasure Cruise. Speaking of Delve, hey, do you want basically Ancestral Recall? Great. It's just a single mana for us most of the time. Again, draw 3 cards because we're going to delve the rest of that cost away. Then there's Chrome Sail Drake. It's just going to cost us blue. Affinity for artifacts for that 6. 3/4 flyer, ETBs. Really top your cards in your library. All artifacts feel this way go into our hand. The rest go into our graveyard. Again, getting things in our graveyard isn't really all that bad of a thing. Then we've got Hulking Metamorph. Again, prototype saves the day. This would be a 9 mana 7/7. We're probably going to be casting it for just 4 mana though. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature control, except it's an artifact, creature, and it's other types. And it has power and toughness. Yeah, okay. Basically, hey, we can get an extra copy of things that we really want an extra copy of. Maybe you want an extra Ghoul Caller's Bell for more mill. Maybe you want an extra Lantern Insight, just in case someone deals with the actual one. Maybe you want extra Timesifter for that same reason. But yeah, you can utilize this in a fantastic way to basically copy in another one of your artifacts or creatures, or just utilize this as creature fodder. And then we've got Broodstar. If you want to put your opponents out of their misery, this is a great way to do so. Star, flyer, affinity for artifacts, power of toughness each equal to the number of artifacts you control. That's going to be a lot. That's going to be an absolute ton. And speaking of a ton, hey, 11 mana on top of our library, yeah, it's going to win us Timesifter battles most of the time. A 10/10 construct that we're never going to pay pretty much anything for. It's going to cost X less to cast for X the total mana value of non-creature artifacts you control. Yep, that's basically going to be nothing. On top of that, we can sacrifice 2 artifacts to return from our grave to our hand if we need to. So there you go. Moving on, we've got yet another fantastic tactic. That's kind of hard to say, fantastic tactic. With cheap choices, and we've got some more high mana value spells, but ones that we don't have to cast for that much because they've got other ways to use them. Lay Claim is a great card. Enchant permanent, you control enchant permanent. We can do that for 7 mana. So if we really need to, we can. If we're like, hey, yeah, you got that game-ending card over there. That's ours now. Thank you for the Blightsteel Colossus. Or we can cycle it away for 2. Again, I mentioned the discard earlier. So yeah, basically a way to dig further into our deck. Also, again, another way to manipulate the top of our library. If we've got something on top we don't want there, we say, let's just draw it and hope something bigger shows up so we can win those Timesifter battles. Next up, Mirror Shell Crab. An artifact creature, so it can be fodder if we need it. It's got ward 3/5/7, but most likely we're going to be channeling it away by paying 5 and a blue to discard it to counter target spell ability unless the controller pays 3. You just can be a great surprising way to counter something. And yeah, again, another card that we wouldn't mind revealing off the top. Then we've got Primarch Escapee, a 4/4 flyer for 7. Not very efficient, but hey, cycle it away for just 2 mana. Then we've got Said and Done. You have these split cards. The total mana value is what matters when it's revealed by Timesifter, which is going to be, what, 7, because 3 + 4. There we go. So Said says return target instant or source from your grave to your hand. Yeah, it can be great to get something back. Or the Done side is tap to target creatures they don't tap to their controllers next untap step. We need some control. We can utilize that as well. Then there's Sapphire Dragon, kind of like that crab. It's a 7 mana, 5/6 flying dragon. If it attacks, we scry 2. Cool, attacks are blocked. But most likely we're going to cast the adventure side, counter target non-creature spell for just 3 mana. Moving on, Slipstream Eel, again, 7 mana, 6/6 that can attack unless the player controls an island. Not all that great, but you know what we care about? Cycle for just 2 mana. Or we can cycle for even cheaper with Stripe Riverwinder, a single blue mana to do so. Or it's a 5/5 with Hexproof, but again, most likely going to be cycling. Then there's a weird one with Waker of Waves. Yeah, there aren't too many cards that have like activated abilities in hands outside of, you know, like cycling and other mechanics that are specific. But this one's very specific. Hey, you know what? Pay 1 to blue, discard it, look at the top 2 cards of your library. 1 goes in your hand, 1 goes in your graveyard. Again, a good way to get some card advantage out of this. Also a good way to say, I don't like what's on top. Let's stop that from happening. Or get in play and creatures control get -1, -0 for some reason. So you can do that too. And then finally, there's commit to memory. Yeah, your opponents probably won't beat this at 10 mana. Again, it counts this side and the aftermath side too. Commit is put target spell or non-permanent into its owner's library second from the top. Keep in mind, you can do this for your own permanent to set yourself up, for that Timesifter reveal. Memory, each player shuffles their hand, library, and their graveyard, then draws 7 cards. A great way to time twister, a great way to reset things. Now, we are not quite done just yet because we've got some other big cards with some big moves. So let's move on to attack number 9, big moves. With Meteor Golem starting things off again, a 7-mana artifact creature. Cool, we can utilize that as fodder if we need to, but also it's got a great ETB, destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls. Next up, speaking of 7-mana artifact creatures, got Sandstone Oracle, 4/4 flyer, ETB, choose an opponent. If they've got more cards in their hand than us, we draw cards equal to the difference. So a great way to reset our hand when we need to. And again, if we got something bad on top, draw it so we can have something bigger on top. Then there's Scourge of Fleets. Speaking of resetting things, enters the battlefield, return each creature opponent's control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand or X the number of islands you control. We're in a mono blue deck. Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of islands in play. Basically, bounce all of your opponent's creatures back to their hand, and ours are going to be fine. So there you go. And then there's Spine of Ishsa, a great card as well. When ETBs destroy target permanent, when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Spine of Ishsa to its owner's hand. So again, we do have ways to sacrifice artifacts, like a Metalwork Colossus. We can get this back. Again, just a great way to remove things though. But now we've talked about every single one of the non-land cards, let's just quickly talk about some of the lands that I want to highlight. And there are a couple of them with some highlighted lands. So first up, let's start off with Dread Statuary. This is a very simple land. It's not that efficient either. It can tap for a colorless. Okay, so that's nice. Pay 4 to make it into a 4/2 artifact creature. The key here is, even though it does cost 4 mana to do this, it is a panic button way to say, I need an artifact creature to sacrifice with my commander. Let's do that. Pay 4 to do so. Next up, Power to the Consuls can help us out in multiple ways. Tap for a colorless or pay 5, tap, sacrifice it. You get 2 1/1 Thopters. So again, 2 pieces of creature fodder for the price of 1 land. Then there's Mistress Factory. Tap for a colorless or pay 1. It becomes a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn slowly land. So again, pay single mana. Now this is creature fodder. You can even just tap this to actually make this into the artifact creature for that creature fodder. Then there's Mistress Foundry. Again, basically the exact same thing, but for 1 more mana. Tap for colorless, pay 2 to make into a 2/2. Again, assembly worker artifact creature. Perfect. That's all we need. Then we've got Urza's Factory. A great card as well. Tap for a colorless, pay 7, tap, create a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature token. This is just a creature token generating engine for us. Once we get things going, we can really just say, yeah, I've got this. If I need to keep making fodder, I can. Next up, we've got Buried Ruin. Pay 2, tap, sacrifice, turn target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. A great way to get something back if we need to. Gargoyle's Castle. Again, a lot of weird off-the-wall lands that work very well with this commander because we need fodder. Pay 5, tap, sacrifice to create a 3/4 colorless gargoyle artifact creature with flying. Again, we don't really care all that much that we're wasting, a land to do this. It is, desperate time, desperate measures. If we don't have any artifact creatures in play, and we need to do it, we need to do it. Then we've got Sequester Test. This one works in a very interesting way with this deck, and it's pretty perfect. Tap for a colorless, pay 4, tap, sacrifice it. Mill 5, then you may put an artifact card from your graveyard on top of your library. So again, mill 5, get things from our graveyard, and hey, get something with a high CMC on top of your library to actually set yourself up for your Timesifter. So yeah, a fantastic play at that. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you enjoy losing your friends. If you are interested in this deck, make sure you check out that card list link, that deck list link in the description below. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to judge you for trying to lose your friends with a deck, and this is definitely a deck that can do the job for you. Taking all the turns with a budget deck like this, yeah, that can definitely upset your friends just a little bit. So yeah, make sure you check out that link. Comment what your thoughts on this, and of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.